Welcome back, I'm Jeff Byers, and I'm going to take you through how to create lighting for a preview render. So when you get a nice object and you got your shader on there or texture on there, I'm going to show you how to create lighting to show it off to as a very quick render but still look really nice. So I'll take you through that process. Alright, the first thing we're going to do is we need to turn Arnold on in our render settings. So you can go to render settings onto this icon here, or you can go on to Windows, render editors, and render settings. Okay, so it's probably going to default at Maya software, so you're going to have to go in here to Arnold renderer. And the first thing you want to do is just kind of leave the renderer at the defaults. Now, if this has been changed by you or someone else, just go ahead and revert back to 3 and then 2 all the way down. And the next thing we're going to check is ray depth. So the default is 10, diffuse is 1, specular 1, transmission 8, volume 0, and transparency depth 10. Alright, because we have glass in the scene, which is difficult to mathematically render because of all the different light rays that it has to go through and the index of refraction that needs to be calculated, it will take a longer time. So we're going to start off with glass because the other objects with regular textures will fly through a render. So anyway, transmission is the thing you need to look at here, and the bottle, if we had another bottle behind it, we'd have to bring this up to 12 to 14. So right now 8 should suffice. Okay, so with that done, we need to set our render output to HD 540. Now your full render, if you were going to render a scene for me, would be HD 1080, but you're just going to create small renders for me. I don't want you to spend too much time waiting for a render to finish. So we can still get very nice quality out of that. So that's under image size presets, and this will be under the common render. So everything's set up now. Let's go ahead and set up our lighting. Think about how lighting is different from than it was 5-10 years ago. Lighting now is basically you do a sky dome and then you add a directional light or some other kind of light to fill in those areas instead of having 25 to 30 different lights just to fake radiosity effects. So I'm going to go into and click on this icon here. This will create a sky dome for us. Notice that the bottle will act kind of weird if that's selected, so don't worry about that. Alright, so let's click on the sky dome and do a Control A. So Control A, and this will get us in the attributes. If you don't see that and you see this, just hit Control A again. That goes back between attributes and the channel editor. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we want to turn the intensity down. Usually the intensity is pretty high, and that's because they don't think you're going to put any lights in, which we are. So, and we're also going to use color temperature to kind of give it a more of a natural feeling, not fluorescent but more tungsten. So the temperature, we're going to set it, and you can set it between 5500 and 5800. 6000 and above starts getting a little fluorescent, kind of bluish. The next thing we're going to do is exposure. We're going to set that exposure to 0.5 as well. So we're bringing this down to 0.5, and we're bringing this up to 0.5. And notice that we have samples. This is our shadow samples, so we're going to bring that up to 2. Alright, and we want it to cast shadows, and everything else looks really good. Now, we're going to mess with the background. I already know I want a gray background, not a white background. That tends to wash things out. It just doesn't look good. So I would suggest something around like 0.1 or a little bit lower, but not black. Black is also very difficult to render against, so we kind of want a gray. So I have AI standard surface shader on the bottle. I have a preset. I used the glass preset, and then I just did a regular AI standard and just changed the color so we can get some reflection and stuff on there. So if you want to see the ground, I'll be happy to show that to you really quick as far as the surface. So you can see that I've got kind of a pastel color. I usually don't go really bright for floors. I want something that really contrasty to the color of the object, so you don't have it blending in. You notice that I have my diffuse roughness down, my metalness run down, my specular weight is up, my color is up, my roughness is at 0.1, and my IOR is 1.520, which will give me a nice reflection. Okay? The roughness here will diffuse the reflection. So what we're going to do is go ahead and once we got the sky dome set up, we need to add another light. So let's go to Create, go to Lights, and go to Directional Lighting. And you don't need to go into the option box with this. The directional light will be centered at 0, 0, 0 in the axis. So go ahead and pull that up and move that back. Alright, so let's go ahead and rotate it, just kind of in place. Another cool little thing you can do with this is you can look through that light if you want to. So you can do that by going to Panels and Look Through Selected. Now we can go back to Perspective, but right now we're going to go into Look Through Selected. And that kind of lets us look at the object, which is kind of cool, right? Kind of a weird perspective, kind of almost like an orthographic perspective or very skewed perspective. But you get the idea. So you can kind of see where you're at, and you can see those little crosshairs in the center. Anyway, so let me go back and go back to perspective, and now we're going to tweak out the directional light. So right now we have it set at 1. Okay, so I think that's fine. I think what we're going to change is some of the attributes in Arnold. So click on the Arnold tab, and we are going to use color temperature. We're going to kind of set these up the same way. Remember, the sky dome was set up that way, and exposure at 0.5, and angle at 4. This will give us nice soft shadows. Okay, like real life, you have a diffusion of shadow behind the object. And then the samples, of course, we'll set that at higher than 1, which is 2. So if you have shadows that look really, really bad at 1, you might want to turn that up to 2. And this basically it's kind of like resolution. It just adds more resolution and gives you a better result. Alright, so let's go ahead and do our first render, and we're going to use Arnold's render view. Okay. So it's under Arnold render view, and so this allows us to see the render in real time, which is kind of cool. So I'm going to move that over here like this so you can see it, and click on the arrow key, and this allows us to see it in real time. So now I can kind of tweak my and if I move that down a little bit, you can see that's moving down too. So I'm going to rotate that a little bit so I can get that shadow within that space there and just kind of make that look a little more interesting. There we go, like that. Excellent. So we got a pretty good, decent render. That looks pretty nice. I like that. Maybe just rotate it around a little bit and get a little closer. Okay. So you can tweak this out as what you see fit. Right now we've got a pretty decent render. The glass looks like glass, and we got a nice shadow, and it's kind of dithering out. So you could be finished with this, or what I would suggest you do at this point is go ahead and shut that down, meaning just click that off, because it will slow things down, and then just shut that down. So if you like your lighting and you're done tweaking your lighting, then the next step would be to go in here and set up your field of view. So let's go in here to this guy right here, and this kind of tells me, mats out what I'm actually going to render. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this, my field chart. That lets me center the object and zoom in and get that centered in a way that I can show my work off. Okay, it's really important that you get this centered and composed in a good manner. When you're done, you can turn off the field chart, which is right here. And what I'm going to do now is we're going to look at a final render. So that final render is right here. Okay. So if I click on that, this will give me a final render. Unfortunately, it's off screen, so I'll try to, it won't take long. Okay. So this render here, let me start it again, see if that'll work better this way. There we go. So this time it'll start right here, and you can see how fast it is. Now this is a final render. This is what you're going to see. It's a little better, it's quite a bit better than the preview render. You can see we get some really nice effects here. Okay, so for a finished piece, once you have it centered, then what you're going to want to do is probably set the render up a little bit higher, a higher resolution, so your shadows look a little bit nicer. And to do that, we will probably set this up from 3 to 5 and transmission to 3. We're going to keep the diffuse at 2 and the specular at 2, and everything else looks good. So this is kind of our render settings for final render for a small scene like this. Now we would up this probably 7 and 8 up here, and then 3 all the way down, and then we would change this for larger scenes. Alright, so with that said, let's close that down, and then let's render this again. Alright, so now we're going to render that out, and it shouldn't take too long. I'm really liking the gray background with it. Okay. Some of you may not think that looks any better, but it does. If I go back, I can see the difference in the shadow. It's mainly the shadow that's causing, that would be needing that extra resolution. Alright, so that is basically it. We're done. We're ready to send this out. So go to File and Save Image. This is very important that you go into the option box and click on Color Managed Image. It's going to be on RAW. If you forget this, which a lot of students do, you will have a very dark image, and you have to bring it into Photoshop and actually do a lot of work to get it to where it needs to be. Color Managed View kind of sets it up to where the gamma settings are correct. So Color Managed View, click Apply and Close, and then go to File, Save Image. Alright, so with that, I want you to put your first initial, the last name, whatever the exercise is, so it would be E2, and then what is the object. And I want you to do this for every object. So, if it's a chair, I want to see a chair. If it's a table, I want to see the table. I don't need all 4 chairs in different renderings, just one chair that represents the 4. Okay? So there's my wine bottle. I'm going to go 02 because I've already rendered this one time. So, and you want to select JPEG, so make sure you click on JPEG. Alright, save that as, and you're done. So, again, do this for every object. Bring this in. You might have to scale your this up a little bit to fit other objects, but you can use this lighting scenario over and over again with different objects by just importing. So, how would you do that? Well, you'd export selected, and then you could import that object in. So, basically, if you want to save this out as export selection, save it as an MB. Okay, so if I go in here and find MB, which is probably, yeah, there it is, and save that out, you can save that out and rename it. Okay, and then what you do again is go to File, and then you would import this into the scene. Very simple. And whatever you want to import into the scene, and then import it in. And I would probably obviously take that and put it in a layer and turn it off so you don't see it, and then put the other one in there. And pretty soon you have all your pieces in there one by one. And then what I want you to do is go ahead and bring your entire scene in, or set up this same lighting system in the scene with everything in it. So that's it, and good luck, and hopefully you guys do some good work. Love to see it, and I'll see you next time.